What up? This is Praveen, aka Braille, and I'm back on my BS. Today, we're gonna be checking out Loading Knobs Cuisine. It's a sequencer. You can either rack it or you can keep it out of the rack. I saw this online. I actually wanted to try it out to try and replace my Acid Rain Constellation. It's a wonderful Euclidean sequencer, but it takes up a lot of space in the rack for what I've been using it for. I find myself not getting too hands-on with it. So I wanted to see if I could take that functionality, basically my drum sequencing, and get it out of the rack. Full disclosure, Floating Knobs reached out. They sent me this unit. They aren't looking for a review. I'm not reviewing this. I'm just gonna use it, see how it goes. I think the other big new thing in here is that we've got a Moog Muse. It's back here, this beautiful thing. We're gonna keep it out of frame, basically. We're not gonna be hands-on with it because what I've done is I've wired it up to the system here. And what that means is we can actually sequence it and run it through the Eurorack Chords chain that I usually use. I've noticed that it sounds a bit thicker, a bit nicer than the Psych and the Odessa, but it's different. So I'm not saying I'm gonna replace these with it, but it's another flavor. Hopefully we'll spice things up here. All right, so let's drop a kick just so we know where we're at and bring in some filtered chords here. So one thing that we're doing here is that we're actually using the crate to sequence the chord progression. So it's a bit loosey-goosey, but basically this CV is being sent to the trigger count input on the PAMs. So we've got a Euclidean sequence there, but the trigger count is being modulated by that CV. All right, let's start sequencing some drums. So the Cuisine has 12 tracks total. We're using 8 as gate outputs for drum sequencing, and then we've got 4 that are being used for modulation. So the first 3 are actually going into the Ultra Perk, which you know I love. One other real big piece of the puzzle here is this module called Traffic. So Traffic is a module that lets you take 3 different trigger inputs, but output from a single trigger output. The real key difference here is that you've got 3 different CV outs that you can tweak per trigger. So it gives you 3 drum sounds, even if you only have 1 drum module. So between that and the modulation we're sending, the Ultra Perk and the Fracture are gonna have a little bit more motion than they would if we just had a single trigger every time with the same CV. So we're gonna modulate the volts per octave so that we get a bit more motion out of this Ultra Perk. We're gonna nudge the sequence as well. So we are setting 4 different modulation steps here, and for each one we can hold and turn the knob to set that modulation value that's going to be output to the volt per octave input on the Ultra Perk. It doesn't give you the actual result sound until you lift up on that button. So I wish it did it in the moment so you could actually test it out. All right, I'm feeling that. Let's get the chords out of the way so we can keep adding some more percussion without it getting too busy. But you know me, it's gonna get busy. That's nice. Just that one other extra Ultra Perk step that's going through this second channel with slightly different modulation gives it a nice little roll. So the third gate output out of the Cuisine is actually going to the Ultra Perk's noise input. I use that for hi-hats. You could do some really great modulation with like the decay of the noise bursts and stuff, so you can kind of get hi-hats all in one. The only problem is it's tough when you're recording it in. You got to make sure you're muting one or the other so that you can get at least the non-hi-hat and the hi-hat sounds separate if you're trying to multi-track obsessively like I am. Kind of like that. Overlaid over the Ultra Perk kind of gives it this nice rolling motion. So now we'll get into Fracture. The next 3 are going into fractures. Again, we've got 2 that are going into traffic for 2 trigger inputs that have slightly different modulation being sent to some parameters here. But then the 3rd is going into another special input that fracture has, which is the tick input. The tick input basically lets you cut off or kill other sounds that are going on, so you can get some nice variation as well. Basically, all of this effort is to give the percussion more motion than you would get if you just had static sounds that you were sequencing with these triggers. I love that, but it's too much every measure, so we're gonna give it 2 measures, and in Cuisine language, those are pages. And then here's the tick input. And the last drums that we've got here are some cymbals through the WMD Crucible. I love this thing. We're gonna try some Euclidean sequencing with this one. Maybe offset it. We've got 2 different inputs for the Crucible. In Crucible lingo, one is called edge, one is called mid, I guess to simulate the area of the cymbal that you're hitting with the stick. So this modulation that we're adding now is the decay of the Crucible. Nice. All right, this is a groove. All right, bringing in that crazy Starlab. Let's talk about it. You might hear that it's got some like real breathing happening with the room size modulation, and the reason that's going down is because we're actually sending envelopes from this Frap Tools Phallus-tree. It's an envelope generator, which are being sequenced here and then modulating the filter to give it a sort of a sidechain effect. But you can also flip this to the positive side, the modulation. Almost like another hi-hat going on. Walking bass line. Well, that was fun. This floating knobs Cuisine is pretty dope. I'm into it. I think I'm actually going to replace my Acid Rain Constellation with it. The Acid Rain Constellation does do a few things that this one doesn't. For example, we've got some AND or XOR logic operations you could run against different channels. It's probably a bit more full-featured when it comes to Euclidean sequencing, but honestly, the interface just never clicked with me in terms of a performative, enjoyable time, so I ended up just basically doing the same thing almost every time. And the fact that this is out of the box is gonna let me actually put some stuff back in here. It's buggy. I've been back and forth with the developer. They are super responsive, making fixes within a day and taking feedback. Yeah, it's a fun little box. Let me know down in the comments what you're using for sequencing. I bet there's a few Metropolis folks out there. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, thanks for watching.